Hi there. Hi, everyone. Bonnie Violet here. And if you don't know where you are at Dragon Spirituality. This is the final episode for this series. Our guest tonight will be Sister Mary Peter. Sister Mary Peter, SPI, is an activist, nun raising joyful resistance who found her vocation through the Radical Fairies in 1987 and served as a missionary in Toronto before moving to San Francisco in 1999. Her lifelong activism focuses on HIV/AIDS, queer youth, civil rights, and social justice. As a divinity student, she co-founded the first LGBT student union at the University of Toronto and led a successful national campaign against conversion therapy in Canada. Her efforts include partnerships to provide street-level health services to sex workers, legal aid for LGBTQIA+ refugees, and resistance to police violence. She is a poet, writer, and former sex worker. As an ordained minister, she joined the fight for equal marriage in San Francisco in 2004 and regularly performs wedding ceremonies. She lives on the coast with her husband of 21 years. Here is Sister Mary Peter.
I am a nun. In size 13 boots, I live my vows in the streets among the people. I am a nun who marches bullhorn in hand, defiant fist held high. I am a nun who can face down any bully and deflate their hate with piercing repartee. I am a nun. Don't fuck with me, or the people I love and serve and vow to protect. I am a big, fierce, fabulous, flaming, cocksucking, cabaret singing, bling wearing, slogan flinging, spirit channeling, soul healing, power defying, authority resisting, community restoring, motherfucking nun. I am a nun, and I am here with you. I will hold you and shelter you. I will comfort and encourage you. I will rally and rouse you. I will never, never leave you. I am a nun. I am a mirror reflecting back your courage and your power and the hope you are for tomorrow. I am a nun with glitter blessings for all and abiding love for each and every one of you. You are my deepest intention. You are my abundant joy. I am a nun, and together with my sisters, with each and every one of you, I stand in the streets, arm in arm, proclaiming one joy, more joy, always joy. Blessed be this pride. All my relations, Ashe, may it be so. I love you all.
Woohoo! You just appear. Woof. How's it going?
Good, thank you. So
Good.
Nice to be with you tonight.
I'm so glad that you're here. I was excited to, some people say they save the best for last, but I think you'll be a good one to end the series with.
Thank you, Bonnie.
I really loved that message. I hadn't heard it until tonight. It had a lot in it. Can you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, that was something that I preached at a rally for sex workers in San Francisco after composing it the night of the Pulse shootings. Like a lot of sisters across the country, our communities really asked if we would please be present to minister to the community, to be in the streets, to hold people's hearts. And so I was there essentially for a 24-hour vigil that evening, and the outpouring of pain and the outpouring of joy and tenderness and the drive-by expressions of hatred, they all kind of distilled into, for me, what was a real cry from my heart. And as I look at it now, it really distills all 37 years of my work as a sister. It really was a mission statement, if you will, that I'm a nun in size 13 boots in the streets, and that my job is to hold my community and to be fierce and fabulous and love them.
It's beautiful. I think you really for me, you really kind of signify what this dragon spirituality is all about. I think they're like a lot of the nuns might have, like the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence may have some sort of like spirituality as part of it, but not, or not like a specific type. And so it's always interesting just to kind of gain just learn of the different experiences. So why don't we go ahead and get started with, I always like to start when you were young. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what life was like for you growing up?
Sure. I grew up in a family with two parents who grew up in poor Irish families, faced a lot of discrimination, very Catholic, very two-dimensional in their understanding of gender. But I was very fortunate in that my mother had a certain wisdom. She was a real lover of Irish culture, and she knew all the old fairy stories. So every night she would open up the big books of Celtic folk tales, and she would read those stories to me. And as I got older, what I realized is, like a lot of cultures who experience colonialism and oppression, when you can't speak your truth directly, when there's a church and an imperial power that kind of dominate the public conversation, women telling those old stories to their children at bedtime is a way of transmitting cultural truth. And as I got older and as I grew up and as I understood a more fluid experience of my own gender and really explored drag and understood that as a gateway for my spirit, all of these stories came flooding back, because all those old fables, they're all about people who were one gender one day and another gender another day, who wore fabulous costumes fashioned of starlight and sun, who came disguised as poor beggar women and then suddenly appeared as queens, or came out of the ocean as seals in the net of a fisherman and turned out to be princes and princesses. So I think the well was pretty pumped and primed by the time I hit adolescence. And I think it was also a really wonderful coded way for my mother to really permission me to explore a kind of a queer spirit. She died when I was 17. She had a terrible esophageal cancer. And so we never got to speak too directly about things. But for all the work my mother did to sort of permission me to be this fabulous fairy child, I'd had a very difficult birth. My mother had me prematurely, and people thought I would die within a week of my birth. And so a lot of people laid hands on me. I got baptized by just about every religion that wasn't nailed down by the time I left the hospital. And she always felt that there was some sort of fairy magic in her child. And so she wanted to encourage that. What was fabulous is my father, on the other hand, did everything he could to suppress that. So he grew up in a very rough neighborhood where being a tough guy was what you had to do to survive. A bit of a gangster when Irish kids were the gangs of the city. And he had a lot of difficulty with women, with the feminine. His mother was a very difficult person for him. And when he was a child, she really oppressed him. She kept him in baby boy clothes long after it was okay. And so he experienced a lot of bullying. So he harbored a lot of misogyny and queer phobia. So when I was 4, my father worked in the garment district in fashion, and he took me to work. And on the way home, I read some of his fashion magazines, and I saw this advert of this beautiful naked man holding a cologne bottle. And everything in me turned on like a light switch. And then 2 seconds later, everything on me shut off because I knew I'd get in trouble. And that tension with my father, as much as my mother was the blessing, the path to understanding, my father was the obstacle I had to overcome. And I must have had, I don't know how many boxing lessons, karate lessons, judo lessons, track, field, football, baseball, hockey, basketball, until finally I was able to leave the house on my own steam after my mother died and kind of create a space for myself and explore. So this wonderful conversation we're all exploring about diverse gender expression and how drag and accessories bring us closer to heaven. All of this has just sort of been going on in my life. And I feel like the world has now had so much more space to invite these conversations. And, just in this series, Bonnie, and well, in you, in the manifestation you're doing tonight, this beautiful Dayglow 1996 homage to J-Lo and the Fly Girls that you've got. There are so many wonderful expressions happening right now, especially in San Francisco. We're very privileged. And I'm just relishing it. I'm just enjoying so much being a part of that community.
It's a definitely kind of a beautiful time amongst some not so beautiful things going on in the world.
As always for our community. Yeah.
Right. It sounds like with your parents being like, it sounds like they both kind of taught you a lot, that probably carries with you now today. Where was it that you grew up?
So that was back in a neighborhood called Cabbagetown in Toronto, which back then was a working class Irish neighborhood. Now, of course, like many places, has been completely gentrified. But when I was there, it was towards the tail end where it was also becoming a foothold for new Canadians, for immigrants. So I grew up with Irish kids, but I also grew up with Eritrean kids and Somalis, Bangladeshis, Jamaicans, Haitians. It was just a wonderful kind of creative place to be.
And so with your queerness, that was not something that was out as a teenager, or when did you kind of like embrace it and say it out loud, I guess?
So the truth of my story is I came out probably in that moment at the age of 4. And then from the age of 4 to 13, a lot of people kept trying to stuff me back in, all of them more fabulously unsuccessful than the person before them. So it was my father, it was teachers, it was priests, it was nuns. And then there was just something irrepressibly gay about me. I mean, you couldn't deny it. It would just bubble up like an effervescent pop in the middle of a hot afternoon and just sort of squirt all over the place. You let your mind go with that wherever you want to.
Right.
But I experienced a lot of bullying as a child because, in a mixed neighborhood where everyone is trying to get a foothold in a culture that's very clear about hierarchy and boundaries and caste, everyone's jockeying for position. And so it's always the queer kid that everybody can push a little lower on the hierarchy. So, one of the wonderful things about that is I learned that I had a gift for humor. And so that comment in my prayer about, speaking truth to power and dressing the bully down with withering repartee, I learned that at an early age. I had to defend myself a lot of times in the locker room after health class or walking home from school in the evening. So like a lot of queer kids, it wasn't always an easy road. But what I've always been blessed with, Bonnie, is there just always been good people in my life who show up when I need them. Early on in my life, I had some two-spirited First Nations people who worked in my neighborhood who intervened one day to stop me getting massacred by a group of kids on bicycles. And they were from the Anishinaabe people. And they just started to talk to me again about those stories and how their traditions had two-spirited people who carried both genders. And a little later in my life, when I was older, when I was in school, I had really had a separation from my father. And I was living very housing insecure. I was always one Chesterfield away from being on the street for more than an evening. And I have to say it was a wild pack of drag queens that just saved me. There was one drag queen in particular. There was a bar in Toronto called Woody's that had a drag show every Friday night. And there was a very glamorous queen, a Filipina queen named Pepsi, who was all of like 5'2", but just, I don't know if it was the heels or the hair or just the energy, but she was 10 feet tall. She saw me one night struggling in the corner of the bar, just trying to hook a trick so that I'd have somewhere to sleep. And she sort of called me back after the show. And, this is a testament, and this is, for me, the spirituality that's in drag. She never called me out. She never put me on the spot. What she did is she invited me to help her with some things she had to do. And so before I knew it, I was one of Pepsi's boys. And it was early on in the height of the AIDS crisis. And so what she was doing was bringing food to people who were shut in, making sure folks were getting their medication, helping them get to appointments, cleaning their house. And so I trundled along like a little rugrat. And she gave me just enough security without asking anything of me other than to do the work. And it stabilized me long enough to kind of get my foot going. And, I was back in school and doing things, and then things kind of picked up after that. But I've never forgotten the charity, the unasked for generosity and charity of drag queens who just saw struggling kids and made sure that they had a meal and a warm place to sleep. And I think one of the things I've always appreciated about the spirit of drag is that spirit of family, that we take care of one another. And you said earlier some of the beautiful things that come out in hard times. Drag is one of those things that carries our culture from generation to generation, because it has this generosity of creating family where there is none, especially when there are hard times. It makes sure that the people who are most on the margin find not just shelter or food or warmth, but also laughter and joy and entertainment and fabulousness and ferocity and a kind of a belonging. So you can never diss a drag queen in front of Sister Mary Peter. You will honestly not survive the experience.
Right. So, and all this was before you turned 17, or was this after you turned, all before 17?
Yeah, mostly before I turned 17. And then 17 was the break. My mother passed away. My father essentially went through a second adolescence and a bit of a breakdown. And that was the moment I left home. And that was a rocky period for me. There were about 5 years we didn't see or speak to each other. Fortunately, at the end of his life, we were able to make up, and we had a very healing end to his life. But that was where really drag introduced itself. Drag and sex work kind of came hand in hand in my life as a survival mechanism, but also as a place where I found my tribe.
Mm-hmm. So were you doing drag as well at that time, or being part of the community?
So Pepsi would let you know I don't have the cheekbones to pull off anything glamorous. So the most I've ever dared call myself is a booga drag nun from the provinces. I can slap on a white face and some glitter, and Sister Mary Timothy for 20 years has struggled mightily to teach me how to blend my blush, and I'm doing better. I can report I make progress, but I would never pretend to be a queen. I'm always more of a fan. But I think it's an important thing. Like, for me, that's the spirituality. Sisters have a very different drag energy than drag queens. Drag queens are these larger than life personas, at least for me. And they create a spotlight where they draw the energy in, and then they work it magically, and they create so much energy. Like, you think of Juanita Moore, you think of B.B. Sweetbriar, or certainly Honey Mahogany, who's just such a leader in the community. I think drag nuns, we've got a little bit of a different spirit. What I say is our drag is like holding up a mirror. So where a drag queen, the spotlight goes right to her, and then she works the energy. When you see a drag nun like me, it's like looking into a mirror. So I could be generic nun number 152. The important thing is that somehow when you encounter me, it causes this moment of disruption. And that's where we get to have this conversation. And I get to work inside your heart a little bit. I get to pull out or tease out some of the joy in you that maybe you're just too tired to claim, or too boxed in, or too afraid, or too shy to deal with. And really what's happening is I'm reflecting back everything that I'm seeing in you. At least that's how I walk as a sister. I know you had Tilda on the other day. Yeah. She talked about how every time she puts on her face, she just sort of says a prayer to the universe. May my face reflect whatever the community needs of me today. And so it's the same for me. I can do a face in 5 minutes in the rearview mirror of my car before a rally, or I can spend 3 hours, and honestly, it comes out about the same. But no matter how long, it's always a prayer when I put this on, that whatever I manifest is really what the community needs to see of itself when I go out that door.
It's beautiful. And so did you start being a sister at that age, or did the sisterhood come later on for you?
I had a very sort of surprising path. It was in my 20s. I was doing graduate work at the University of Toronto. I was doing a divinity degree, and I was living in an intentional community called L'Arche, which lives with developmentally disabled folks. And I was also in ACT UP and Queer Nation and very militant and all over the place. I was archiving in the lesbian and gay archives in Toronto, and I was cataloging, and I literally found a shoebox of photos and articles. This was in 1987, and most of it was just a couple years before, like 1980, 81, 82. And they were all articles about this group of gay men who dressed up like nuns and ran around our gay neighborhood, which was called Church in Wellesley. They were going to the AIDS hospital, singing Christmas carols and bringing food and doing ministry of touch and healing, when at that time, even the nursing staff in full hazmat suits were very apprehensive about going in. They were just breaking down those barriers. But, you know, I asked the folks who were senior archivists, they'd kind of been lost, like nobody really knew anything about it. But when I saw those images of these men literally in traditional sister habits with carol books and, you know, picnic baskets full of food and lotions, something lit up in me. And I knew that the activist and the priest wannabe and the researcher and the teacher and the healer, that all kind of came together in that vision. And I had no idea what to do with it. And then what happened that year, Bonnie, is I had a bit of a nervous breakdown. It was just a rough year. I had a lot of friends die. Things were not going well at school. The more I was in school, the more it was clear the church and I were meant to pass in the night, but not to be bedfellows. And a friend one day just gave me the keys to a car and said, look, it's solstice. There's this great radical fairy community in Tennessee. It'll only take a day or so to get down there. Go. So I did. And I got out of the car in this muddy field, and the first person I saw was a short little fairy with a big beard, wearing a ballet tutu and wellies, who said, oh, hey, welcome to solstice. Put your stuff down. We've got to go feed the goats. Come on. And it was like 3 hours of like goat feeding, cleaning. I mean, the girl had me working. And he's like, where are you staying? And I'm like, well, I don't really know anywhere. And so he invited me to sleep in his house, which he called Three Sisters. And over this week of solstice, what was amazing was we just started to share these stories. And I told him about this experience of seeing these sisters and knowing it was for me, but not knowing how to get about it. And, you know, when I said earlier, people appear in my life when I need them. This little old fairy introduced himself and finally said, well, people call me Mish around here. But my name is Sister Missionary P. Delight, and I'm one of the founders of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Wow. And that shoebox you found was the second convent after San Francisco that existed in Toronto for about 3 or 4 years and then shut down. So let's talk about what it is to be a drag nun. And so the rest of that solstice was like a master class in learning everything about the sisters. And there were some sisters from the Midwest, Sister Clara Compassionata from Iowa and a couple others. And then on solstice evening in front of a bonfire, you know, one of my spiritual graces is I do things before I think through what they actually mean. And then I get the download later. And they put a veil on my head and asked me if I had a name. And out of nowhere, I chose the name Mary Peter. Mary with an E honors the fairy greeting, Mary meet, Mary part, Mary meet again. And Peter was the confirmation name I chose when I was 13. I had a difficult confirmation. My bishop was a real pain in the ass. So I decided I would choose the name Peter because he got crucified upside down to one better Jesus. And so I was going to show this bishop, nobody could out-Catholic me. So I kind of claimed that. And the next thing I know, Mish is giving me this grand sounding vocation to go back to Toronto and rebuild the lost convent. And I swear to God, I was at the border before it dawned on me. I had no idea how to do that. And she hadn't given me a manual. So that's really how it started. And then I had friends in the theater who helped me sew my first habit, people who helped, Pepsi and others who helped me figure out how to do drag makeup. And then I walked out onto the street one night for the first time and went to a coffee area, a place where there was a coffee shop with stairs in front called The Steps, and just sat down and wondered what would happen. And what happened is people started coming up to me going, what are you? And I would explain, I'm a Sister of Perpetual Indulgence. How can I help you? And just as a lark, somebody said, well, sister, hear my confession. And I'm like, well, okay, my son, come sit down. And so the first couple confessions were sort of silly, and I blessed them and said, go and sin some more. But by about the fifth or sixth person that sat down, something shifted, Bonnie, and people were not just having a joke with Sister, they were pouring their hearts out to me. And then what happened is the people on the steps around us, we formed a little community of support. And so it went on for about 3 hours, 4 hours. And that was the night that sort of sealed it for me. And then my work just kind of grew gradually from that. There was a bar called 501 that wanted to do a fundraiser for the local AIDS hospice and asked if I would call bingo, because I guess they thought nuns are good at calling bingo. So I called bingo, and then I lived near the intersection of two streets where young kids worked as prostitutes, particularly young trans kids and queer kids. And I knew that they had a lot of needs. They needed protection, they needed a needle exchange, they needed counseling. And I knew some folks that worked in the provincial Ministry of Health, and I managed to get condoms and needles and lube and safety stuff. And one Saturday night at 2 a.m, I walked out onto the street like this. And the first hour was getting grilled pretty hard by kids who are suspicious. But they read my beads and figured out that I was a bit of a ditz, but I was genuine. And then that began this whole ministry to street kids. And from there, it just sort of continued. And, I just find that my whole life as a sister, it's always the community that invites me to understand what this means, because they're the ones that have the need and ask for support. And in that exchange, something just really magical happens. It transforms me, and it transforms the people I work with.
Right. It sounds almost like a full circle moment for like the way Pepsi was for you.
Yeah, Pepsi was clear that my mission was to pay it forward, and I have never forgotten that any day that I have been a nun.
That's beautiful. It's so many times those times in our lives that seem so I don't know, just so dark or not, I don't know, savory or however way we want to call it, like tend to be in my experience, one of the like biggest gifts that we have once we get on the other side to kind of help people through that.
Well, when I think about my experiences with drag, Bonnie, there's a lot of exploitation in the queer community, especially when we're talking about vulnerable youth. And what I've always found is the kindness of drag families, very much like houses in the ball culture. There's always this place where you can find shelter and reprise. And as a sister, I think one of our biggest jobs is to sort of stand in the middle of the pain and create space and hold space so that people can be safe and take a moment and take a beat and maybe resist kind of the powers that are coming after them, or call out the exploitation and name it for what it is. And then just be that bridge to move people to a better, safer place where they've got more space to express their own truth.
So we do have our first question.
Excellent.
So how has the twin pandemics of COVID-19 and police brutality shaped how the sisters show up in the world? And thank you for showing up in the world. Minister of Celebration, Marvin K. White.
Marvin, you sexy and fabulous minister. That's a great question. Thank you for showing up in the world every day. You're amazing. I think I can speak for myself first and for the sisters. These two crises have put us back at our roots. The sisters in San Francisco, like the Velveteen Rabbit, are we real? Well, we became real when AIDS ravaged the community. And sisters came out with Playfair, the first safe sex education, came out with some of the first hospice care. Like I said, in Toronto, braved the HIV wards and touched the broken body, comforted the broken spirit, consoled the families. This pandemic has put us right back at square one. And I think we needed it because it's tempting to be a fabulous nun all the time. But I think the work is really to touch the broken body. And George Floyd's murder in particular, but all of the murders behind it, remind every sister both that our job is to stand in that place of struggle and to express allyship and support. But increasingly, I will be honest, as a sister, identified as a white cis sister in most places, though I claim other things too, it's made us very honest about the work we have to do, Marvin. We are a community that was founded primarily by white men and a few bio-females. We did not know at the beginning of our order a lot about trans issues and trans community, and so we weren't very good. We were a little slow to catch up to the world in that. And as sisters have exploded all over the world, we have sisters in Uruguay who fight death squads every day. We have sisters in France taking on police violence in the suburbs of color that are mostly Arab and African, standing up to people in oppression. And in Canada, we have two spirited sisters really teaching us about Aboriginal culture. We're learning that we have our own work to do. And so one of the things I think this twin pandemic has done is remind me that this face I wear is really a vow to my community of service. But the service is very unique. It's to make space for joy and to really push the guilt and the shame out of the way, because so much of what the oppressor uses to exploit us is fear, shame, and guilt, to make us feel little about who we are, to make us judge our neighbor or the person that looks a little different. And being a sister, the point of this is I'm a clown. Who's going to take me seriously when I show up at City Hall dressed like this? So if I take that on, it takes the pressure off of everybody else behind me to show up as you are. And if I claim the space to be taken, and address truth to power looking like this, maybe in a cabaret number, you can do the same from where you are too. So I think more than ever, Marvin, I think this moment, not just these two crises, but Pulse really broke me open in a new way. That was a hard night for me. But it was a gift, because what happened was, in over 50 cities across the United States, when communities were struggling, how do we hold the community? Sisters came to the forefront and opened space on the streets in 50 cities for the community to mourn, to organize, to rally. I mean, here in San Francisco, Sister Roma and I stood on the back of a truck with, people from all parts of our community and just broke the space open. And then we held vigil at 18th and Castro all night so people could come and grieve safely. And we held that space every year until other folks in the community could kind of take over the service. But thanks for the question, Marvin. I think it's brought us to the radical roots of who we are. And it also reminds us that we have our own work to do. And you can never be complacent as a sister. You always have to make more space for challenge and for joy.
Right. And kind of along those lines, Cass Brayton is asking, what are your sources of joy these days?
There are so many. I'll give you an example. Pride weekend, I was so depressed. I don't know if you felt this, Bonnie, but usually Pride week, sister's busy. I mean, where am I not showing up, right? I lose 10 pounds every Pride. It's my only diet and exercise all year. And I was really worried. It was just going to be so isolated. Between the Thursday and the Monday of Pride, I was in Pride experiences 24/7. I sat in on a Zoom with Polish queer activists talking about fighting literal fascists before their election. I was there for a Bronx fundraiser for transgendered youth, led mostly by Puerto Rican drag queens. I was privileged to be in a Navajo Nation drag queen show that was raising money for COVID. I was with Black Lives Matter activists. I was with two spirited folks. I sat in on a ferry coffee in West Vancouver, caught up with friends. And it just showed me that so much of what our focus goes to is the evil that's coming at us and all the people attacking us. What I had lost sight of was, at the grassroots level, all of the people networking this beloved community together. And the content of that weekend, the natural intersectionality of people, no one was struggling to use pronouns, no one was struggling to respect one another's context. It broke me open, and it gave me so much hope. It really did. So thanks for the question. But I think every day one of the blessings of being a nun is I meet so many people, Bonnie, That's the beauty of drag. Drag propels you into all these places you would never go. And the richness and the beauty and the courage of people. I was talking to some African-American folks in Mississippi this morning who are trying very hard to organize the gay community in the face of COVID in Jackson, Mississippi. I can't even begin to unpack all of the struggles they're facing, and yet the sense of family and joy and beauty of what they're doing, it really inspires me to do better every day.
Another great question. How do you feel that people can best be your ally, especially if we're stuck at home right now? Also, thank you for the joy you bring to the world. Amy Springer Ox.
Oh, Amy, thank you. It's so nice to have you here. You know, one of the confusing things for me is I am a boot nun in size 13 boots with a bullhorn who's prone to showing up at protests. That's my MO. Being in my kitchen for 158 days now and counting has sucked on some level. I mean, my 28 step commute to my virtual world is just not my usual MO. But you know, like a lot of sisters, we're learning how to use the tools. Just like we used printing presses to create flyers back in the 80s. And we organized telephone trees for people when you had to go home to pick up the phone on a cord. We're learning how to adapt. And so I'm trying to be really present virtually to people, but also, like for me, Amy, I don't know if you find this, but I have a rule where on my social media and my social presence, I try to do 80% positive, where I'm reaching out and affirming the good work I'm seeing and touching, you know, checking in with people directly to have little chats during the day or send a message or have a video hangout. And then the rest of the time, yeah, I'm pushing information and education and activism, making sure people know how to vote. But a lot of what I'm doing is just trying to raise the light, hold the light up, and not lose sight of the fact that as isolating as this is, at the same time, you know, we're having this global reach where kids in China, young people in Moscow, they can't be outside because the police will come and pick them up. But if they're careful on their video connection, they can watch a sister doing a crazy cabaret act, and it inspires something. So thanks for the question. I hope you feel that you get to do the same. And, you know, Amy, when you don't, there are days that are very dark. I'll be very honest. Being a joy worker means that sometimes the tank gets empty. And solitude is okay in those times. I take time to read people who inspire me. I'm reading a lot of James Baldwin again, and Bayard Rustin, Langston Hughes. I'm reading a lot of the old mystics, Aelred of Ravoux, a gay monk from the 1300s, people who really call to me. But I'm also, I'm learning not to be scared to reach out and say, I could use a phone call today. Or do you have time to just hang out with me? Or I have a crazy sister in Arcata who's doing Friday cooking. She calls it cocktails. So half the time she's had the cocktails before she gets down to the cooking. So the recipe, I don't encourage you to try this at home, but the ability to pop in on this crazy, I don't know what that is, cocktail chicken casserole moment just lifts my spirits sometimes on a Friday when work has been very hard. So I hope you feel you get to do that too. And, you know, I'm on Facebook as Mary Peter. I have a public profile. You're welcome to get me at Sister Mary Peter on Insta. I try to make myself really available to folks.
Yeah. I think the big thing is just trying to be visible. There's like so many opportunities right now to try something different. At least that's what I've felt really just inspired. And I've also kind of been forced to do it by myself. You know, like it's so easy just to say, oh, I would do it if so-and-so would help me, or if only we could, you know, and then now it's like, girl, you want it done? You got to do it. And then you realize like, oh shit, I can do it.
Well, look at this whole series that you've created. That was just an idea, and wow, look at what's going on. But that's a good note that you know, we don't have to do it by ourselves. We've got tech help. I've actually been tech support. It's been startling that I know how to do that. But But I think let's just keep using this as a time for experimentation and creativity. And, if it doesn't work, so what? Have you seen TikTok lately? There are so many things on there people are going to regret 20 years from now, but so what? There are a million of them. Your regretful moment is just going to get lost in some video clip. So let that be like fluff on the shoulder of the goddess, brush it off and move on. But take the risk. I think it's a time to really do that.
For sure. So our next question comes from Todd, which is who that's how we met, was through Todd. So Todd says, "Dear sister, each time I hear how the sisters generally, and you specifically, move in our communities and the world, I'm inspired to imagine the very best of what the church and faith leaders can be and do. I would love to hear you dream with me, about how churches and faith leaders can partner with nunneries and sisters and other queer and POC centered groups so that we are all loving people like you and the sisters do."
Oh, Todd, thank you. Okay, let's spill some tea on Todd.
I know, right? Where do we start?
Todd struggled to become ordained as an openly queer man and is doing amazing work within a church structure. So snaps to you, sweetheart. I also think that Todd is the longest running vocation to sisterhood that has yet to be realized I have seen. But I swear one day the veil is going to sit lightly on his head. I just feel it. The force is strong in that one. So Todd, there you go. But I think let's just be honest. I think the pandemic has been a really good moment to hold a mirror up to what we call churches. So many churches decided what was important was to get people back into their buildings. And they said that was because they were washed in the Lamb of Jesus or protected or all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it was, to fill those coffers and make sure that the money was coming through. Let's just call that for what it is. And I think that's exploitation and putting people at risk in ways that are sinful, if you want to use that language. But let's think about what other churches have done. And let's just think about what each of us has done. I had a moment when I was in divinity school where I was really struggling. And I was thinking credentials were important. I had to get credentials to be a minister. And it was the Jesuit who ran my college that had me over and told me, "You're banging your head against the world, dearie. And you're spending so much time trying to get back into the building when everybody you need to talk to is out there in the street. So, you're a doctor that doesn't need a hospital. You're a priest that doesn't need a church. You're a teacher that doesn't need a school. Forget the building and the overhead. Just get out there where the people are and do your thing." And of course, look how that turned out, right? No overhead, except buying my own jewelry. So I think we have to kind of get rid of this barrier that we call church, this structure that we have. Whether you're in the building or you're out on the street, whether you proclaim the name of Jesus or Muhammad or the Buddha or the daisy that you saw this morning or the amazingly orgasmic fuck that you had last night, whose name almost comes to you, but you forgot to write it down, however that Godhead manifests for you, that's what we need to speak into the world and give life. Because if this pandemic has shown us anything, the worst thing is to be felled by something that takes your body, breaks you down, and leaves you dying alone in fear and pain. And if you think about the journey of the sisters with AIDS, with the pandemic, with Pulse, those moments when the body is broken down, those are the moments when the most profound joy has to show up. And I don't mean we go around being Pollyannas. We grieve, we hold grief. We create a crucible where people can put their fear and their emotion and their pain. We hold that for them. We temper it to make it strong, and then we give it back. But I think there are so many things. Just yesterday, I saw an international group of ballet performers who created a video montage where they did Swan Lake from their bathtubs. It sounds so cockamamie. I was in tears by the end of the video. It was so beautiful. There's one moment where their feathers are flying everywhere in the bathtub, and you could just feel the intensity of that moment. You know, there are other moments where there's this young man in Houston, Texas, who does these walks around his house. He goes, "Ha, fuckers," and just does this stream of consciousness conversation about the issues of the day, lays down the tea, but does it in such a way that's just so generous and truth-telling. You walk away feeling uplifted. So I think, Todd, the answer is do the work that you're called to do, but keep your eye open for the people doing it on the street corner or on the video channel or quietly in the corner store or in the homelessness camp down on the street corner. There are some homeless folks I think of who are regulars in the Castro. Some of the best conversations I have are when we're sitting down together. They see everything. And sometimes the medication or the voices make it tougher to get the message out, but they're witnessing things and they're telling truth. And their church, they're breaking open church, even if it's even if it's not in any scripture you've ever seen.
Yeah. So yeah. So Amy has another question. Amy says, how do you both empower yourselves when you are truly down or when it's totally new to yourself? Being stuck at home on chemotherapy, I've lost that push, and I want to know where you find it when it has been lost.
The first thing, Amy, is I want to honor that doing chemo is rough. So when you don't have the energy, the first way to finding it is to be honest and say, I don't have the energy, and to allow your body to rest. 37 years of doing this, I turned 55 this year. Self-care is sexy. I've preached that for a long time, but I'm now learning that because in the pandemic, I've had to address health issues. You know, in my mind, I'm still a 20-year-old thin nun. I'm not. And there are moments when I just push my body too hard. So start there. Just do an honest diagnostic. And if you don't have the energy, allow your body to rest. Because sometimes I think the spiral gets worse when we just exhaust ourselves trying to do more than we can. I had a beautiful sister, Sister Roma, tell me on one of those days when I was having a tough time, I couldn't go to the People's March. I did a lot of amplifying and messaging and work around it, but Roma said, girl, you've done plenty in 40 years. We got this today. We got this. Don't feel guilty. Just take care of yourself. Well, that was a great message. So I think the wisdom of just being honest about who you are, like I said earlier, it's okay to ask for help. And then I think Tilda said this when she was speaking to folks last week. Some days when she puts on her face, she just feels tired. She doesn't know if she has the energy to do it, but she's made a commitment. So she puts the face on, she goes out the door, she gets on the stream, and things start to happen because people connect with you. You don't have to be a nun to put on your best hat or great earrings, or as Bonnie is displaying right now, a fabulously quixotic wig and backwards baseball cap and big hoops to bring it and make realness happen for people. And she's just sitting in her apartment. You know, let that happen too. Let those spontaneous moments happen. And if it's tough, phone a sister. We're here, and this is what we do. And right now, we got a lot of time to do it.
Right. Yeah. I'm sending you some good energy, Amy. Thank you for being here tonight and sharing yourself with us. Mm-hmm. I was curious about how do the sisters find themselves in rural areas much?
Yes. Over the last decade, one of the most amazing things, social media has changed sisterhood in North America in particular, because little kids in Arkansas and Birmingham, Alabama, and South Florida and Texas can turn on their computers and see this and go, hey, that looks like something I want to do. So the biggest explosion of sisterhood in North America has been in exactly those places: Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Sacramento, Palm Springs, Nevada. People are pulling it out. You know, one of the things when you feel like you want to become a sister and there's nobody doing that near you, all it takes is finding 3 other people who feel the same to start working together. And then we have a group called the UNPC, the UNPC, which is a group of advisors from all the different sister houses. You can connect with them online. And if you really feel like this is something you want to do, they'll give you some guidance and help. Usually it takes folks about a year. You figure out what your look is, what your name is. You know, everybody's in a different community. So, you know, being a nun that looks like this and does what I do may not work in Arkansas or Iowa or Idaho. So what's going on in Arkansas or Iowa or Idaho for you, or what's going on in Spanish for you, or what's going on the reservation for you, where this vocation, you know, to bring joy, to remove guilt and shame, to honor the work that women traditionally have done for centuries of standing in the breach, helping the broken body, comforting the afflicted, saying truth to power, creating space for joy. Well, how's that going to look in your community? And then you'll be surprised. It's not always an easy journey, but when you have a community around you, when you're building that beloved community, and then you decide that taking vows are a way to put a container around that to make it grow and nurture it, a lot of amazing things happen. We've, I think, tripled or quadrupled the number of sisters working in North America in just the last decade. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We're coming up on a few more minutes left of the show. I know that you were sharing a lot of links and information for folks. Would you like a moment to talk about those a bit?
Yeah, you know, I just think that at this moment in our community's lives, there are some things that are really important for us all to focus on. One of them, I think, is really the election that's coming up in the United States in November. And I'm very happy to say I just joined an organization called Drag Out the Vote 2020. It's a collection of drag queens all across North America who decided we're going to band together and do what drag queens do: put on shows, amplify the message, get people to turn up. So if you're a drag performer or a drag artist or someone in the drag community and you want to help, dragoutthevote2020.org is actively recruiting ambassadors to help with that message and to get people prepared. So I'd say that's a really important thing to do. If you're just a member of the community and you're not sure about, you've never voted before, it's been a while, there's all this mishigas about what's happening, there's a great organization called Vote Riders, voteriders.org. It'll help you figure out how to register, what the rules are for absentee ballots. It also gives you opportunities to join online campaigns, to register other people, to get people to the polls. So it's a great organization. One of the other things I think we have to focus on is the impact of this pandemic has been to make a lot of our community housing insecure and economically vulnerable. And particularly in our community, there are some folks who are struggling a lot more than others. And so I just wanted to lift up TGIJP. Miss Janetta Johnson has been dominating the street on this one for a while. She's just been really taking care of particularly trans folk of color, many who've been touched by the mass incarceration system. She's working hard right now to make sure that folks have shelter and safe housing and support. So TGIJP is a great organization. There's a group called People's Breakfast in Oakland. It's a grassroots socialist, mostly POC organization, turning out food for folks, making sure people are getting the support they need. And then of course, our trans home here in San Francisco is helping with shelter, addressing instability, counseling needs, providing services. So that's a really important thing too. And then Sister Tilda mentioned them, but I just want to give a shout out again. There's a group in West Oakland called West Oakland Punks with Lunch, who are exactly who they sound. They're a group of punk kids making sandwiches and lunches for people every day in the community. Totally grassroots. They're doing it all by the string of their shoes. And, you know, that's a good group that you can get out and support and help from the pandemic. And then more globally, Jose Andres, I think if you've heard of him, a Spanish chef, he launched a group called World Central Kitchen, where he got frustrated with the government doing nothing. So he organized chefs and kitchens and has now been working in over 240 cities. He's served 25 million meals since the pandemic started. So World Central Kitchen, no matter where you are in the country, you can guarantee that World Central Kitchen is there. And it's been great because a lot of the restaurant and chefs and kitchens that are shut down, they're finding the ability to work and organize around doing this charitable work, and it's sustaining people and giving them energy through the cause. And then, the other thing is just our health, that folks are really struggling in health. And I said earlier, I had the privilege, the Navajo Two-Spirited community, the Diné people, had a drag fundraiser, and one of our sisters, Sister Navi Ho from Arizona, was part of that show. She's amazing if you get to check her out on Insta. There's a First Nations community health source in Gallup, New Mexico. It's been around for almost 50 years. They run on a shoestring budget too. It's all Diné people providing services to folks. They're an organization that really could use our support right now, because one of the hidden places that the pandemic has really hurt people has been among the First Nations and Two-Spirited people in this country. They've been so many broken promises already. The promise the federal government made to help has not been coming through. So whatever we can do there. And then we've got a Roots Community Health Center here in East Oakland. They provide a lot of quality, comprehensive healthcare, and they do it in ways that are really culturally sensitive. So they work in the Filipino community, the African American community, Latinx communities, Asian Pacific Islander. They really stretch their arms out to catch a lot of people. So I know that Perry is being helpful in posting the links here, but I think if we as a community can really focus on the elections, supporting voting. I don't want to tell people how to vote unless you're going to vote for Trump, and then we should have a conversation. But we need to turn out, because this is a once in a generation moment. And really supporting our community that's on the edge with housing and with economics, and then really supporting the people who are struggling with health. It's very clear, Johns Hopkins the other day leaked an assessment where they're pretty clear the pandemic is going to rage, at least in the United States, through 2024. That was a very sobering thing to hear. And the people who are going to be most affected are the people we love the most. And so we have to reach out and hold each other and hold ourselves. So anything I can do to support you in that, if I can amplify, if there are other community groups, share them in the chat here. This will get posted and recorded later. We'll want to spread that word. Bonnie and Glide are tremendous. The Transgendered Community Cultural District and Glide are always working hard to support people. Certainly the Sisters, www.thesisters.org. We do a grant cycle 5 or 6 times a year. We've done special community grants targeting the African American community and the Indigenous communities lately, people impacted by the pandemic. So we're out there, we're doing the work, and you can too, and it doesn't take too much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for everything. We're like right at a time. So I just want to thank you for showing up and rounding out our last episode of this series. I was really looking forward to our time today, and there's just so much that you shared with us today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. And for all the people you can't see, just thank you for this generous and joyful and gentle spirit you bring. I'll call out on your Facebook page, you do walk and talks in the morning where you're just walking to work with your mask on. And sometimes, girl, you're just not focused, but that creates this wonderful space for community. And I'm just loving the way you're doing that. And it's a great example to the rest of us. And Perry Fenton is behind the camera here, making all this look so smooth. If it was just the two of us, trust me, chillin', this would be a shit show. Thank you for doing a wonderful job organizing all this and getting it up to people. You're a dear, and I love you too. So, and to everybody who took some time tonight and who's going to share this with other people, we might be alone in our kitchens, but we are never alone in our hearts. This sister has her eye on you every day and is showering you with love. And together with me, I want you to say, no matter where you are, one joy, more joy.
Joy.
Always joy. Make room for joy every day because it's in you and it's the thing that's most precious and it's the gift our world needs. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us tonight. So thank you so much for joining me on this series. Big thank you to Glide and the Glide Pride team and the Transgender District for supporting this series. Take care. I love you and be well. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.